is funding terrorist organizations.
Perfect.
Specifically, you want to start with Taliban?
Yeah. I mean, it'll all go connect. So this is just to be a long response probably. But I want to talk about the buckets of money first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, please do.
So there's 3 big buckets of money. And then we focused on the third. So the first bucket of money it was $7 billion. And this was just basically the bank reserves the government of Afghanistan owned when it fell. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So it was offsite, right? It was here. So $7 billion. Mm-hmm. So basically what the U.S. government has done with this $7 billion is they split it in half and said, we're going to give $3.5 billion to the victims of 9/11. If anyone from victims of 9/11 have gotten any of this $3.5 billion, which is earning insane interest monthly, please let me know, because I've yet to meet someone besides lawyers who made any money. So someone needs to be on this $3.5 billion that the U.S. siphoned off and figure out where it is, what's happening to it, and what people are doing with it. So we didn't even look into that piece. So the other $3.5 billion got taken and put in a Swiss bank account. This is so what we saw from. So in Libya, there was $200 billion that went missing. Okay, completely different situation. $200 billion of Gaddafi's money is like gone. So we get very concerned when something moves to Switzerland. So $3.5 billion moves to Switzerland, and now this is given to the Taliban. So the $3.5 billion belongs to the Taliban government. It's overseen by 4 individuals in Switzerland, a State Department officer, which is crazy. Like, I could see Department of Treasury, Commerce, like put a real money person on it. So a State Department officer, a Swiss diplomat, and then 2 Afghans. One Afghan kind of makes sense. He was basically the head of their finance department way back when, kind of when the Taliban first started taking over. He at least has a background. And then the last Taliban guy, it's very strange. I don't like to say rumors, but there might be some sort of nepotism that got them into that role. And the nepotism might involve family connected to our envoy. So we have an envoy to Afghanistan, Tom West. Lots of issues involving him and his sympathies towards the Taliban. Even after the fall of Afghanistan, he actually said, we will do anything at all costs to recognize the Taliban. So this is the broker we have, right? He'll do anything at all costs to recognize the Taliban? Are you kidding me, right? So this guy's already a problem. So these are the people. So it's just these 4 people overseeing this $3.5 billion. It's already earned like over 180 million in interest. And then, so I've asked around to see, has the Taliban taken any money from it? And then I get mixed responses. Some people say they haven't touched it. Some people say, well, we think they paid they owed the Uzbekistan all this money for it's kind of like electricity bills. And they did pay off Uzbekistan. Some say it came from that money, some say they don't. The interesting part in the Uzbekistan piece is the Taliban is paying them off and clearing those debts. Because if you remember, it was like around June of 2021, before the fall of Kabul, the U.S. military actually told the pilots, hey, in case of emergency, fly the planes to Uzbekistan. That's why all those planes flew to Uzbekistan. U.S. military texted and told Afghan pilots to do that. So all these planes, as you can imagine, are still sitting in Uzbekistan, and the Taliban want the planes back, right? So they're trying to make nice with Uzbekistan to give the planes back. Like, Uzbekistan, don't give the planes back. So anyway, so that's that. So anyway, 3.5 million Taliban has access to, okay?
Billion. Can I ask who's the State Department official overseeing this?
I don't know the name of the State Department person.
Do you think it's obviously a Taliban sympathizer, correct?
Most likely. So that's that. I didn't really look at that money because obviously the 3.5 billion is not where the money came from AQIM, right? So then there's a second pocket of money, which everyone tells us is the 40 million a week that comes on the airplane and comes into Afghanistan. The interesting part is I was like, well, is it 40 million a week, right? Because you got to ask these questions because, there's not been a lot of honesty. So the plane comes in weekly. The amount of money on the plane weekly is 43 million to 87 million. Like, that's a big stretch. If you tell me it has 40 million on the plane and the plane is arriving with $87 million. So let's just talk about the 40 million piece. So that 40 million piece gets taken from the plane. It's brought to like Afghanistan International Bank, which, as you can imagine, is making so much money off the exchange of this insane amount of money weekly. And then it's supposed to then go all to humanitarian aid, right? It's obviously not happening that way. 70% is getting siphoned off and going to Taliban-only causes, and the majority of that is to the Taliban military. So the way the Taliban's doing it, I mean, they're doing the most basic thing like bribes, but that doesn't get you to 70%. Then they've done this thing where every NGO that collects money from this pot of the 40 million has to have a Taliban representative basically like on their board. So Taliban has complete control as a board member of where the money goes. The last part, which is the smartest thing they did, is, as you can imagine, there's a lot of these long-standing NGOs in Afghanistan the State Department has relationships with. Well, Taliban just went in and gutted them completely and put all Taliban in them. So State Department will say, oh, we've had a 12-year relationship with them. We have this record. And they're not being honest and telling you, oh, well, the NGO we had a relationship with, none of them work there anymore, and it's all now just Taliban. So that's the key way they're siphoning this money. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that bucket, but one thing I want Americans to understand is in that bucket of the 40 million we send each week, we are paying basically welfare to the Taliban martyrs' families. So every Taliban member who died during the war with us, the U.S. government is paying them a stipend, the family. So our families of Americans who died there aren't getting squat, but we are paying Taliban families for basically dying while attacking us.
Whoa.
Yes, we're funding that.
This is just enraging.
And, you know, I asked a couple of people that question straight out, like, do you not think this is not ethically correct? And actually, one person gave me an answer of, well, it'll stop them from joining ISIS. I'm like, the Taliban guy's already dead. Like, they give you these bullshit excuses as to why they're funding, like, our enemies. So...
Well, I think that's a huge problem in America to begin with, is making excuses.
For terrorist sympathizing. And not paying attention to the fucking money. Okay, so that's bucket 2. Bucket 3 is the most interesting, right? So bucket 3 is the ISIS dollars, right? So nobody knows the amount of the ISIS dollars because there's all these classified annexes on the Doha deal that have never been released. Congress needs to release them because it's time that we know what they say. But anyway, so that other money on the airplane is the ISIS dollars, okay? So... guess what was done?
What?
Well, what do you do? What do people do when they like to follow terrorists around? We followed the money. Mm-hmm. So the money's all the money in the airplane is supposed to go to the Afghan International Bank and go to humanitarian aid. Well, a big chunk of the money comes off the airplane and goes other places, and it has 8 stops. So you ready for them? I'll just do the 8 stops, and then we'll talk through each of them because it'll be easier, and maybe I'll remember it better. First stop... So this is the delivery weekly of U.S. dollars. It goes to the Prime Minister of the Taliban. So his name is Mullah Mohammed Hassan Akhund, okay? The second delivery goes to my favorite person, the Deputy Prime Minister, Mullah Burader. The third delivery goes to the GDI, who I told you is Taliban CIA. It's run by... Abdul Haq Wasik, if you remember, he was one of the ones released for Bergdahl. So far, by the way, Mohammed, number 1, Burader, and Wasik, these are all sanctioned designated terrorists. So all 3 of these deliveries are against U.S. and international law, by the way, okay? The next delivery goes to the Ministry of Interior, which I told you already is led by Sirajuddin Haqqani, and that's where all the passports are being made for terrorists. The 5th one, Siraj is double dipping. Then they do a delivery to his house. So delivery number 5 goes to the home of Sirajuddin Haqqani, which should blow people's mind. This man sent 1,050 suicide bombers at U.S. and NATO troops. Over 1,000 suicide bombers were sent by him alone. And the U.S. is dropping cash off at his house weekly. Like, it's mind-blowing. Then, I'm almost like losing track where we are. The next delivery goes to Hibatullah Akhundzada, who's the head of the Taliban. The next delivery goes to Saif al-Adil, who is basically the head of Al-Qaeda's military commission. And then the last delivery goes to 3 people, but I think we wait, because if I do that one, we're going to have to talk about the first 7 deliveries, if that's okay.
Okay.
So we'll come back.
Let's start with number 1.
Yeah. So number 1, like I said, Prime Minister of the Taliban, designated. He's an interesting fella. He is basically... So he got put in his role because they thought, hey, he's longtime Mullah Omar supporter. He will stay in line with the Taliban. Like, he's the right person for the job. The interesting part is publicly he backs the head of the Taliban on everything. Privately, because during those 20 years we were fighting, he got very, very wealthy off Taliban funds and did a lot of investments in Pakistan. So he has like these natural leanings towards the Pakistanis because he has huge financial investments there. So he's kind of a little two-faced. He's playing the Taliban and playing Pakistan, right? So in case he needs the fallback location of Pakistan. And what a lot of people don't know is he's not going to be in his position long because Hibatullah has been trying to move him out. He's trying to put his chief of staff there, but he has cancer. And so he's having to go to Pakistan for cancer treatments, as you can imagine, because 5 million people fled Afghanistan, and who all fled? The educated, the good doctors. So he has to go to Pakistan to get proper medical attention because he can't get in Afghanistan. So that's basically our first delivery. The second delivery, like I told you, goes to Mullah Barader, who we already talked about, right? Went to Iran, made this deal with the Iranians and Al-Qaeda to send Al-Qaeda guys to attack U.S. and Israeli troops. Huge violation of the Doha deal. Just the Iran, just this Iran deal. Huge violation, right? There are so many violations of this Doha deal we have with the Taliban, and no one's negating it and keeps letting this money come. But even well before the fall of Kabul, there is a huge violation of the Doha deal. Like, the Taliban detained an American named Mark Frykes, right? And basically what happened is we had a special envoy before West who was just as bad as West, with his Ross Wilson. And he knew the Taliban detained Mark, and they downplayed it because they didn't want this fake peace deal to go through. So like, no, it's not the Taliban. It's people trying to ruin peace. And they downplayed it. And then, of course, around the fall of Kabul is when we got Mark, after the fall, and we released him for the #1 narco trafficker in Afghanistan that the Taliban were under, right? So the Taliban had him the whole time. Basically, the State Department lied and downplayed it to keep the Doha deal going. So just let you know this.
Can you explain the Doha deal real quick?
Yeah.
So everybody understands what that is?
Yeah, honestly, I don't even understand the Doha deal, but yeah. Doha deal was essentially the U.S. brokered what they call a peace deal, but it's not. They brokered a deal only with the Taliban for the future of Afghanistan. And in this deal, basically, they made all these promises, and unfortunately, the promises are in a lot of these secret annexes, but they made a bunch of promises to the Taliban, not to the allies we've been fighting for 20 years, that we would stop supplying the Afghan military. The Taliban in return would stop attacking us. There's all this back and forth, but essentially, we made all the promises that we were first going to abandon the Afghan military for the Taliban, and then we were going to leave completely. And then we gave the Taliban a bunch of concessions, and then the Taliban wasn't allowed to commit attacks against us and do all these type of things.
Okay. Yeah, I thought it was something about bringing peace to Afghanistan for the next 20 plus years.
Which isn't true. Yeah. So what a lot of people don't realize, they call it a peace deal. That's just the lie. That's putting like paint on a pig. This deal was only a negotiation with the Taliban. It did not include like parliament. It didn't include the Afghan military. It didn't include any kind of different sectarian groups in Afghanistan. It was the U.S. and the Taliban. So just so everybody knows, this was only a deal with the enemy. It would never have brought peace to Afghanistan because we only dealt with like the bad guys in Afghanistan. We didn't even include the good guys. And then we screwed the good guys over by taking all supplies from them and let them fall, right? So this was to give basically Afghanistan, which ended up being back to the Taliban, because somehow in our government, they think that the Afghans want the Taliban. It's a broken system. I saw it already forming. In 2010, they were doing reconciliation with the Taliban, and the train had left the station, and this is kind of like the end result of really bad assessment.
I got another question before we move on to bucket 3, but I don't want to. Is it? So you had mentioned that on the plane, I believe you said there is Taliban money and ISIS money.
Well, money to fight ISIS. So it's all Taliban money.
Money to fight. Okay, I misunderstood then. I was, okay.
No worries.
That negates it.
Don't start any rumors.
All right. No, thank you for clarifying. So, all right, bucket 3.
Okay, yeah. So I got to remember who we talked about now. Yeah. GDI, right? Mm-hmm. So we spent a lot of time on GDI, so I don't think we have to do much on GDI. But again, it's Taliban's intel organization, and obviously they're holding Ryan Corbett and secretly another American in a cell. Then the fourth one is Ministry of Interior. We spent a lot of time on that. The interesting part, though, is, when we talk about this threat to us, right, from these fake passports, but there's also a threat going on, as you can imagine, to our allies. So, I'm saying they captured 30,000, but then there's like 70,000 missing total. They killed 10,000. They're able to do this because they're using biometrics, right? Biometrics we left behind. Those biometrics sit in the Ministry of Interior building, right? So I want people to understand, like, the Taliban are like really targeting these people, and that's how they're finding them and getting them. What a lot of people don't understand is kind of within the first year after the fall, the Taliban didn't really have the biometrics up and running. So they almost faked it, right? Like I once worked at a theme park and we had an annual pass, and like you stuck it in the machine and then you put your fingerprint on, but the fingerprint didn't work. It was just to dissuade people from handing their pass, so you thought it was fingerprint enabled. And so the Taliban for kind of a year faked, hey, our biometrics are working. Then they went to like the Chinese and the Iranians and they said, hey, help us fix, we can't get this all working. So they got the system working, and then they got it deployed on mobile devices, right? So now it's at the border crossings. So I want Afghans to understand, if you went through a border crossing like 6 months after the fall and you were fine, don't assume you're fine now, because they didn't have it working then, even though they pretended it. Now they do. So they have the entire passport database working, the entire criminal database. They have the entire PACE system for the Ministry of Interior and the Afghan Army, so our allies. They have the entire PACE system for the NDS, which was the Afghan CIA, and they have the entire PACE system for the Supreme Court. So this is what the Taliban is basically using these PACE systems to then go find the allies. So they know they have the right guy because it's tied back to their damn payroll.